Have you ever imagined someone who lies to their own mother every day, telling her they're on vacation while actually sleeping on the freezing floor of an airport and eating scraps from the trash? This is the story of Leticia, a Salvadoran immigrant who left her home, her children, and her mother with promises to return for them. What should have been the beginning of a dream turned into a silent nightmare. She lives like a shadow in the corridors of an American airport, hiding her pain from the world and from her own family. If you enjoy interesting stories, please like, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our content. Tell us in the comments where you're watching this video from. We'd love to hear from you. Leticia Duarte didn't say goodbye with tears. She smiled bravely, hugged her mother and her 2 children as if nothing hurt, though inside she felt like she was breaking into 1,000 pieces. She was 31, her hands rough from years of poorly paid work, and her back loaded with dreams that didn't fit in her suitcase. She left Chalatenango, El Salvador, on a Monday at dawn, on a bus route that took her first to San Salvador and then to the border with Guatemala. The journey was long, uncomfortable, and full of fear, but in her mind there was only one thing: to reach the United States, find work, and return soon for her family. She wasn't leaving forever, she told herself. It was just a matter of months. Months that would turn into something very different. She wore a used denim jacket, carried a backpack with 3 changes of clothes, a couple of forged documents that cost her almost half her savings, and in the inside pocket, 2 drawings made with crayons, one from her son Dylan, 8 years old, where he drew her as a caped hero, and another from her daughter Sophia, 5, where the 3 of them appeared holding hands under a smiling sun. Those wrinkled papers became her emotional anchor, her shield, and her condemnation. Leticia had worked for more than a year fixing old fans and repairing old televisions in a small improvised workshop in the backyard of her house. With that, and selling pupusas, stuffed corn tortillas, on the street at night, she managed to gather enough for the ticket and to cover her first days abroad. It was a risky decision, she knew, but the desperation to give her children something better was stronger than fear. She had already seen other women from the town do it. Some returned with dollars, new cell phones, and fulfilled promises. She wanted to be one of them. Before leaving, she promised her mother, Doña Teresa, a woman with calloused hands and a steady gaze, that she would soon send money, that the house would have cement floors, that the children would go to a better school. She swore that she would not leave her alone raising her grandchildren. She swore she wouldn't give up. And although Senora Teresa begged her crying not to go, Leticia just kissed her on the forehead and said, "Just a few months, Mom. I'll go and come back. You'll see." The route took her first to Mexico City, where she spent a night in a migrant hostel. There, she met other women with similar stories, some heading to New York, others to California. Leticia felt strong, determined, as if she were part of something bigger. She had an address written in a notebook, the contact of a woman she had met through social media who promised to receive her in Dallas, offer her a place to sleep, and help her find work, caring for children or cleaning houses. Everything was arranged. When she boarded the plane to the United States, she trembled inside, but not from fear, rather from anticipation. When she arrived at Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, things changed brutally. Getting off the plane, the first thing she felt was the dry cold of the air conditioning that contrasted with the suffocating heat of her country. Then, the silence. Her friend never came. Leticia waited in the arrivals area for hours. She checked her cell phone again and again. She sent messages and none were read. She called and got the voicemail. Maybe she's delayed, she told herself. Maybe her battery died. But as the hours and then days passed, the truth began to take shape. She had been left alone, without an address, without contact, without a place to go. She spent the first 2 nights in a hostel near the airport. It was cheap, dirty, and the beds were hard, but at least she had a roof. She ate bread with butter and watery coffee from a Hispanic store and used her last bills to buy a SIM card. She still believed someone would show up, but that wasn't the case. On the morning of the 3rd day, with her broken suitcase and worn-out soul, Letitia returned to the airport. She had nowhere else to go. She sat on a bench in front of Terminal A, watching people pass by. It was as if everyone knew where they were going, except her. That's where her other life began, the one that wasn't in her plans, the one she would never tell her mother about. Outside, her family believed she was succeeding. At home, Senora Teresa hung a picture of Letitia with her backpack in the living room, smiling before getting on the bus. "My daughter went north," she would proudly tell the neighbors. "She's going to send money so we can fix up the house." No one suspected that her daughter at that moment was sleeping on the cold floor of the airport, hugging a borrowed blanket and silently begging not to lose faith. Because dreams, when they break, make no sound. They only leave silence. A silence that hurts more than any goodbye. When the plane touched down in Dallas, Letitia clenched her fists. She looked out the window at the grayish, flat landscape of the airport, so different from the mountains of her Chalatenango. Her heart was beating hard. She had made it. After months of effort, sacrifices, and decisions that hurt her to the soul, she was finally stepping on American soil. She was afraid, yes, but above all, she had hope. The same hope that made her hug her children with a broken smile before leaving. The journey through immigration was tense. Although she had fake papers, Letitia wasn't a criminal and didn't know how to lie smoothly. The officer's uniform, the cold gaze, the English she didn't understand, all made her feel more vulnerable than ever. But this time, she was lucky. They stamped her passport with disdain, returned her documents without further questions, and she was able to leave without being detained. Once outside, she felt dizzy. She didn't know if it was from tension, the time change, or simply the weight she was carrying. She followed the flow of passengers to the pickup area, where she expected to meet Carla, the woman she had been talking to for weeks through social media. According to Carla, she lived on the outskirts of Dallas, had a room available, and worked caring for an elderly woman. She had promised that, upon arrival, she would take her with her, show her how to get around, and even help her find work. "There's always a need for house cleaners here, Letty. Don't you worry," she had written in one of her messages. Letitia walked out uncertainly to the meeting point. She looked around. She expected to see a sign with her name or a smiling face. But there was no one. She waited. First an hour, then 2. Later, she sat on a bench, mentally reviewing all the messages, convincing herself that Carla might be on her way, that there would be traffic or an emergency. She tried to call her, but the call didn't go through. She checked the messages, all sent, none read. 6 hours passed. The sun went down and the terminal became colder and quieter. Letitia decided not to panic. She used her last dollars to buy a local phone chip from an automatic machine and reload data. With renewed hope, she tried calling Carla again. This time it rang, once, twice, 5 times. Until the voicemail picked up, she called 3 more times. Nothing. She wrote to her via WhatsApp, Facebook, even Instagram. No message had the blue double check. When she finally accepted that no one would come, it was night. The corridors were almost empty, and fear began to settle in her body like an unwanted guest. She walked to the exit of the airport, not knowing exactly where to go. Outside, taxis were waiting, but Letitia didn't dare approach. She was afraid to spend the little she had. She didn't know which neighborhoods were safe and which weren't. She decided to go back inside and sit near the domestic flights area where there was still movement. With her suitcase beside her and her back against the wall, she tried to stay awake, but fatigue was stronger. She nodded several times until, unwittingly, she fell asleep. She woke up startled at 3 in the morning when a cleaning guard passed by with his cart sweeping. It was the first time she felt that this place could swallow her if she let her guard down. At dawn, she looked for a bathroom to wash her face. She didn't know how to use the automatic faucets or hand dryers. Everything was foreign to her. She washed her face with cold water, combed her hair with her fingers, and put on the only clean blouse she had left. She left the bathroom and looked for something to eat. She found a small store where she bought a sweetbread and a small juice. She ate it slowly, sitting by a window overlooking the runway, watching planes take off. At that moment, she still thought Carla would appear. But as the hours of the second day passed and the calls continued without response, the truth became impossible to ignore. She had been abandoned. At the end of the day, she used her phone to look for an inexpensive place to spend the night. She found a hostel near an industrial park, more than half an hour from the airport. She took the light rail and then walked about 10 blocks to get to the place. The area seemed dangerous to her. The reception was protected with bars, and an old sign said, "No refunds." She paid in cash without talking too much. They gave her a shared room with a small bed, without clean sheets. Letitia didn't sleep well. Her roommate was a white woman, possibly a drug addict, who didn't speak to her all night. She covered herself with her jacket and hugged her backpack. She was afraid of falling asleep and having her documents or the few clothes she had stolen. The next morning, she bought instant coffee at the reception and left without direction. The little money she had left was no longer enough for another night. She walked through streets she didn't know, between closed factories and abandoned shopping centers. She tried to ask for help at a church that had a sign in Spanish. The door was closed. She knocked, waited. Nobody opened. She searched on her phone if there were any shelters nearby. She found one, but when she got there, they told her they didn't accept people without valid identification. At another, they wouldn't even let her pass the gate. It was then that she understood that she was not only alone, but invisible, that without papers, she didn't exist for the system, and that in the United States, being invisible could be more dangerous than anything else. With a broken heart and swollen feet, she decided to return to the only place where at least they didn't ask her anything, the airport. She walked back. She had no more for the train. When she crossed the automatic doors of the terminal, the artificial smell, the white lights, and the murmur of voices in English gave her no comfort but offered a kind of refuge. She sat in the same corner where she had spent her first night. This time, she didn't cry. She just sat still, looking at her reflection in the window glass, wondering how it was possible to feel so far from the world, being surrounded by so many people. There, sitting on that icy floor, Letitia understood that her real journey was just beginning. The days began to blend into each other. In the airport, time isn't divided into mornings, afternoons, or nights. There are only moments when there are more people and moments when everything seems paused. For Letitia, the clock ceased to matter. She no longer had appointments, nor commitments, nor destination. She only moved by instinct, looking for a place to sit without drawing attention, finding drinking water, checking her cell phone in case someone, anyone, had responded even by mistake. After 3 days of being there, her body began to feel the strain. It wasn't just the dark circles under her eyes or the dull hair. Her feet hurt from walking without direction, her eyes burned from poor sleep, and she felt a constant pressure in her chest as if something was squeezing her from inside. But she couldn't afford to break down. Not there, not yet. During the day, she pretended to be just another passenger. She browsed souvenir shops as if looking for gifts. She stopped in front of flight panels, pretending interest in destinations she couldn't pronounce. Sometimes she sat with an empty water bottle in front of her to look like someone waiting. The technique worked. The guards didn't bother her if she didn't stay still for too long in the same place. But the early mornings were different. When the lights dimmed and flight announcements repeated like a distant echo, the airport became a cold and cruel space. The cleaning staff passed without looking at her. Families slept in padded seats with airplane blankets. Some passengers snored, others looked at their phones. No one noticed Letitia, and that somehow protected her. She found a corner behind a closed counter between two vending machines. There she arranged her backpack as a pillow and wrapped herself with the blue blanket that an employee had discreetly given her. The floor was freezing. She wore a t-shirt under her sweater to insulate the cold, but it didn't help much. Sometimes she woke up shaking, with cramps in her legs, and had to get up and walk a little to avoid going numb. She had learned to clean herself in public bathrooms. She went in early when there weren't many people yet. She used an empty bottle to wet some toilet paper and clean her face, her armpits. She washed her hands with liquid soap and, if she was lucky, used the paper towels before they ran out. She kept her hair tied back in a ponytail. It wasn't out of vanity, but because that way she better disguised how dirty it was. One morning, while brushing her teeth in front of the mirror, she noticed something that shook her. Her lips were cracked, her eyes sunken, and a dark spot was beginning to appear on her neck. It was the reflection of someone who no longer recognized herself. But she didn't cry. Not at that moment. She left the bathroom with a firm step and repeated to herself what she had been telling herself for days. It's only temporary. I just need a stroke of luck. Her phone, which barely turned on anymore, was her only connection to the world. She reviewed the photos of her children every night before sleeping. Dylan with his school uniform and separated teeth. Sophia with her little braids and that mole on her cheek that she always kissed before putting her to bed. Those images were the only thing that kept her sane. Because if Letitia was clear about anything, it was that all this pain had to be worth it. During those eternal early mornings, she met others like her, people who also lived in the shadow of the airport. A Guatemalan woman who sold little bracelets made with colored threads to passengers. A young Honduran man who slept on a sheet near the parking lot. And a Venezuelan man who had been in the terminals for weeks, waiting for papers that never arrived. It was with him that Letitia began to share silences. They didn't talk much, but every so often they would sit together to eat something or simply to watch people pass by. He taught her how to ask for hot water for free at certain cafes. He told her which machines gave fake receipts that served to justify being there, pretending a recent purchase. Tricks that Letitia clung to like lifelines. The most difficult nights were those when hunger wouldn't let her sleep, because hunger doesn't just hurt in the stomach, it hurts in the soul. On those nights, she wondered if she had done the right thing, if she had been fair to her mother, to her children, to herself. She questioned whether she should have stayed there, settling for little but being close to her loved ones. But then she looked at the ceiling of the airport, those eternal lights that never went out, and told herself, I've come this far. I can't give up now. So the days passed. Letitia stopped counting how many there were. Every time the loudspeaker announced a flight, she closed her eyes and imagined boarding one, heading to any place that wasn't there. But upon opening them, she was still sitting in the same corner, with her back against the wall, invisible to the rest of the world. And yet, she continued, breathing, resisting, because if she had learned anything in those empty days and those cold early mornings, it was that hope, though fragile, also knows how to survive in silence. After a week of living at the airport, Letitia had already learned the movements of the place as if she were part of it. She knew which terminals closed in the early morning, which remained open, and at what times surveillance relaxed. She had also identified the bathrooms where she could clean herself without being observed, and even the exact point where the Wi-Fi didn't cut out, though she almost had no battery left on her phone. But the hardest part of her new routine came when food began to run out completely. At first, she stretched the leftovers she had, some cookies, a half-drunk juice, an apple she had saved from the hostel. She ate little, slowly, trying to deceive her body. but you can't fool hunger for long. After a few days, her stomach closed from being empty so much. It was then that she crossed a line she never imagined she would cross, looking for food in trash cans. The first time, her hands trembled. She waited until there was no one nearby. It was in one of the self-service cafeterias near Terminal C. She looked around and approached the can discreetly. Upon opening the lid, the smell hit her, but she closed her eyes and put her hand in, carefully rummaging between paper bags, stained napkins and wrappers. She found it almost at the bottom, a sandwich in its original wrapper, barely bitten. It was still warm. She took it out, wrapped it with a clean napkin she had taken from the counter, and walked away slowly, head down. She sat behind a column and ate in silence. She chewed slowly, with a mixture of relief and shame. That night she slept with less pain in her stomach, but with a new feeling in her chest, humiliation. The next morning she did it again, and so on, until she stopped counting. Letitia learned to move like a shadow. She checked the trash cans after customers left. She did it quickly, as if her life depended on not being seen, and in reality, it did. Sometimes she found a bitten fruit, a half-eaten bag of chips, half a muffin, a glass with juice or coffee still hot. It wasn't food. It was leftovers, but for her, they had become her only source of nourishment. Over time, she discovered that the best places to find remains were the uncleared tables. She waited patiently, pretending to look for something in her bag, and when employees were slow to clean, she would approach, take what she could, and walk away before being noticed. Hunger had stripped her of pride. On one of those nights of searching, she crossed paths again with the Venezuelan man. He no longer slept on the floor. He had found an abandoned wheelchair in a corner of Terminal E, and there he spent his hours, covered with a grey blanket someone had given him. When he saw her arrive with her plastic bag, he smiled at her. "You found something today," he said. Letitia nodded without raising her eyes. "A bread and a little juice," she replied in a low voice. He offered her half a granola bar he had saved. She hesitated for a few seconds and then accepted it. They ate together that night, in silence, sitting in a corner where no one bothered them. They weren't friends. They didn't even know each other's last names, but they shared something stronger: misery. Letitia began to organize her routine around cleaning schedules. She knew when the collection carts passed and which restaurants threw away more food in better condition. She always carried a folded plastic bag inside her backpack to store what she found. Sometimes she could save something for the next day, but most of the time she ate on the spot before someone saw her and threw her out. One afternoon, a young woman who was cleaning tables caught her rummaging through a can. She didn't say anything. She just looked at her. Letitia lowered her head, sure they were going to chase her off. But instead, the woman approached, pretending to sweep, and whispered, "Wait 5 minutes. I'm going to leave a bag with things that didn't sell." Letitia stood still. 5 minutes later, under one of the tables, a paper bag appeared with 2 donuts, a cold coffee, and a small box with fruits. She didn't say "thank you" out loud. She just looked up and nodded, her eyes full of water. From that day on, occasionally, the employee would leave small bags under the same table. They didn't speak. They didn't know each other. But Letitia felt that, even if just for a few seconds, someone saw her. Each rescued meal was a silent victory. And yet, each bite also reminded her of all she had lost. It wasn't just hunger. It was the shame of knowing she had been reduced to that, a foreigner living off what others threw away, a woman who once dreamed of sending money home and now ate leftovers in a corner of an airport. That brutal and lonely reality forced her to become invisible. She learned to eat covering her face with the sleeve of her sweater or with the hood. She didn't want anyone to identify her. She feared someone would record her, that they would upload a video to the internet saying, "Look at this immigrant eating garbage." She felt an irrational but constant fear. because the world doesn't forgive misery. On the most difficult days, she thought of her mother, of how she imagined her counting the hours until Letitia sent her first dollar, of the children asking when she would return, and she, at that moment, removing the wrapper from a half-eaten piece of hamburger. That was the new language of her life, surviving without making noise, without bothering, without leaving a trace, eating without being seen, sleeping without being heard, existing without being noticed. But even so, Letitia kept repeating to herself every night as she covered herself with her thin blanket and listened to the flight announcements in the background. One more day, just one more day. I'm not going to give up yet. And as the days progressed and Letitia's body weakened, the urgency to find a way out became a necessity that tormented her even when she slept. The cold floor of the airport had already left marks on her back. Her skin was dry, her clothes began to smell of confinement, and her reflection in the bathroom mirrors was increasingly distant from the woman she had been when leaving El Salvador. One morning, while looking for water at one of the drinking fountains, she heard two people speaking in Spanish. A tall woman in a cleaning uniform was talking to an older man who spoke with a Mexican accent. They were talking about a shelter near downtown Dallas, a place where they help people who had nowhere to go. Letitia stood paralyzed. She waited for them to finish talking, and when the woman was left alone, she approached timidly. "Excuse me, that shelter, does it still help people?" The woman looked her up and down, as if evaluating whether she could trust her. "Yes, but it's not easy to get in," she replied without harshness. "They need to know who you are. They ask for papers, ID, all that." Letitia felt a stab in her stomach. "And if I don't have anything?" The employee didn't respond. She just sighed, took a notebook from her back pocket, and wrote an address on a loose sheet. She handed it to her in silence. "You can try, but I don't promise anything." Letitia kept the paper carefully. That night she didn't sleep. The next day, she used the last coins she had to take a bus to the address she had been given. The journey was long. She got off in an area she didn't know, full of old buildings, graffiti, and people who, like her, walked without a fixed direction. The shelter was an old building with a sign in English and some poorly written phrases in Spanish. She rang the bell, waited. A woman came out and looked at her from the other side of a metal fence. "How can I help you?" she asked in English. Letitia swallowed. "Do you speak Spanish?" "A little." "I need help," she said in a weak voice. "I have nowhere to sleep. I have no job. I have no papers." The woman paused, then nodded slowly. "Do you have any identification?" "No, I don't have anything." The worker lowered her gaze. She shook her head. "Without documents, we can't receive you. I'm sorry. Rules of the place." Letitia felt as if someone was taking the air away from her. She tried to insist. "I just need a place for a few days. I can clean, I can help in the kitchen." "It's not because of us," she interrupted. "It's because of the authorities. If something happens to you, the shelter is responsible. We can't take that risk. I'm really sorry." Letitia stood there standing, gripping the fence with cold fingers, until she understood that begging would do no good. She turned and walked away, feeling her feet weigh twice as much. She walked aimlessly through several streets. There were no benches to sit on or shadows to rest in. At noon, she stopped at a store to look at her reflection in the glass. She looked like a homeless person, the emaciated face, dirty nails, tangled hair. She felt invisible, but also dangerous, as if her mere presence was a threat to order. She tried 2 more shelters. One was full, and the other didn't even open the door. At each place, they asked for the same thing: identification, security number, contact address. Letitia had none of that. She had no legal existence, and therefore had no right to anything. The return to the airport was devastating. She had no money for the fare, so she walked. It was more than 3 hours on foot under the afternoon sun, with the backpack on her back and sweat stuck to her body. When she finally saw the doors of the airport, she felt relieved, but also defeated. It wasn't just physical exhaustion. It was the mental weight of knowing she was outside of everything. She was trapped in a country that didn't recognize her as a person. She couldn't work, couldn't sleep in a safe place, couldn't access help. And going back wasn't an option either, because with what money, with what face? The next night, she tried to talk to a manager of a small store inside the airport, a place that sold coffee, magazines, and sweets. She asked for a job. She said she could clean, restock shelves, sweep whatever. The man looked at her with distrust. "Do you have papers?" Letitia shook her head, lowering her gaze. "I'm sorry, I can't risk it. Others have been fined for that." It was then that Letitia understood that her situation wasn't temporary. It wasn't a weight, it was a confinement without walls. The opportunities weren't hidden. They simply weren't for her. She sat that night in one of the least trafficked corners of Terminal D. She rested her head against the wall and closed her eyes. She thought of her mother, of her sweet voice telling her on the phone, "God will help you, daughter. I know it." But Letitia no longer knew what to believe, because back in El Salvador, her mother imagined her working, eating well, adapting, while here she was a shadow with no right to exist. And nobody seemed to notice. If you're enjoying this story, please like, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications to stay up to date with all our content. Letitia's cell phone, old and with the faded pink case, vibrated every 3 or 4 days with the same notification. Call from Mom. Always at the same time, 5 in the afternoon, El Salvador time. Doña Teresa never failed. Since Letitia left, there hadn't been a week without her calling, without asking how she was, without insisting on knowing when the first remittances would arrive. Letitia always answered, without fail. Even if she didn't feel like it, even if her stomach hurt from hunger, even if the sadness that was consuming her showed in her eyes. Every time she answered, she pretended everything was fine. "Hi, Mom. How are you?" "Good, daughter. Here, with the kids." "And you? How's work going?" Letitia forced a smile, even though no one could see her. "Oh, Mom, tired. But thank God I've already got a little job in a house. I'm cleaning and taking care of some children. It's a bit tough, but they're paying me." On the other end, her mother let out a sigh of relief, and Letitia felt as if they were plunging a knife into her chest. "Oh, daughter, that's good. And will you be able to send something yet?" "Not yet, Mom. They told me they pay every 2 weeks. But soon, I promise." It was a lie. Everything was a lie. She had no job, no house, no papers. She slept behind a column in Terminal D and ate what others threw away. But she lied because she couldn't bear the idea of destroying her mother's hope. She lied because the truth was too cruel to say out loud. After each call, Letitia went to one of the least transited corners of the airport, took out the photo of her children taped to the inside of her backpack, and cried silently. She couldn't help it. She cried from guilt, from shame, from fear. She cried because she didn't know how much longer she was going to be able to sustain that lie. In one of those calls, her son Dylan took the phone. "Mom, the teacher asked me where you were, and I told her you're in the United States working a lot. Are you coming for Christmas?" Letitia felt her throat breaking. "Of course, my love," she replied with a trembling voice. "If things go well, we'll see each other in December. And are you going to bring me one of those American toys?" "Yes, my love, a really nice one." She hung up shortly after. She couldn't bear to keep lying, but she couldn't be honest either. How could she tell her son that she didn't even have enough for a second-hand toy? How could she explain to him that she slept on the floor like a vagrant, that no one would hire her, that she had neither an address nor a future? At the airport, Letitia began to write small notes in a notebook she had found discarded. They weren't letters, they were confessions, thoughts she couldn't say out loud. On one of those pages she wrote, "Lying hurts me, but telling the truth would kill me. They need to believe I'm okay, because if they fall, I fall too. The routine of calls became an act of theatre. She rehearsed beforehand what to say, how to sound cheerful, what details to invent so her mother wouldn't suspect. She said she was learning English, that she ate strange but tasty American food, that she had met other Salvadoran women who supported her. All lies. But every word came out with a conviction that even scared her. One day, Doña Teresa asked her to do a video call. Leticia panicked. "Oh, Mom, I can't. The internet here is really bad. Besides, I'm about to go to work." "But another day, okay?" Her mother insisted a bit, but then let it go. "Okay, daughter, when you can." Leticia felt relieved, but also broken. She was so afraid of her mother seeing her reality, of noticing that she was thinner, with a sad face, neglected hair, and that background of white walls that didn't belong to any house, but to an empty corridor of the airport. That fear became constant. That's why every time she talked on the phone, she moved to an area where there was less ambient noise. She didn't want to hear the flight announcements, or the wheels of suitcases passing nearby, or the voices in English that would give her away. She knew that any detail could bring down her story. At the same time, lying weighed on her. It hurt like a poison she took daily, but she told herself she had no other choice. That her mother, already elderly and with delicate health, couldn't bear to know that her daughter slept in a corner, without eating, without help, without anything. And Leticia couldn't afford a crisis either. If she collapsed, everything would end. So she continued the farce. Because lying was the only thing that kept her strong. The only way to sustain a dignity she no longer had physically, but that she clung to with her fingernails and teeth emotionally. Because despite everything, Leticia was still a mother. And protecting her children from pain was her way of loving, even if that love was built on a lie. Each night after the calls, she looked at the screen of her cell phone until it turned off for lack of battery. Then she put the photo of Dylan and Sophia in her backpack, lay down on the same cold floor as always, and repeated in a low voice, "I do all this for you." And then she closed her eyes with tears that no longer surprised her, because deep down she knew that the lie was also part of the resistance. It was a Tuesday. Leticia didn't know the exact date, but she remembered the day because it was one of those in which she had considered giving up. She woke up with pain in her bones, an empty stomach, and a knot in her throat that not even water could wash down. That morning, she didn't check the trash cans like other times. She had no strength. She simply sat on a bench, in a secluded corner of Terminal D, with a lost gaze and a tourist brochure in her hands. The paper was wrinkled, discolored. It was one of those that show the typical attractions of Texas: cowboys, museums, Texan food restaurants. Leticia held it without reading, feigning interest, just to not look like a homeless person. It was her shield against the eyes of others. Another disguise. It was then that she saw her. A woman, about 40-something, brown skin, tied-back hair and wheeled suitcase, was looking at her from a few meters away. She wore a denim jacket and a red scarf. She didn't have the hurried expression of common passengers. She didn't seem to be waiting for anyone. She just observed her, as if she could see beyond the pose that Leticia was trying to maintain. Leticia lowered her gaze. She didn't want trouble. But the woman approached slowly, without intention to make her uncomfortable. "Are you okay?" she asked in Spanish. Leticia hesitated. Her first reaction was to shake her head, as she always did. To pretend she was waiting for someone, that she had a flight, that she was just passing by. But that voice had something different. It wasn't pity. It was sincere concern. "Yes," Leticia finally replied, almost in a whisper. "I'm just waiting for a flight." The woman sat next to her without asking permission, unhurriedly. "How many days have you been waiting?" she asked, with a half smile that wasn't mockery. Letitia looked at her for the first time. She didn't know what to answer. She felt a knot in her chest. That simple question, so direct, disarmed her. "Many," she said with a broken voice. And then, for the first time in weeks, someone listened to her. It wasn't a complete confession, but Letitia told her the essentials. That she came from El Salvador, that she arrived alone, that the person who promised to help her disappeared, that she had nowhere to go, no papers, no job, no money, that she slept between columns and ate what she could rescue from the trash. She didn't talk about her children or her mother. That pain she still kept to herself. The woman listened in silence, without interrupting or judging her. She nodded several times. Her name was Maribel. She was Mexican, from Ciudad Juarez, and was passing through Dallas to visit her daughter who lived in Houston. She said she had known many stories like Letitia's, that she had worked for years in border shelters helping migrants. "You shouldn't be here alone," she said. "This is no life for anyone." Letitia shrugged. "I have no other option." Maribel took a small notebook from her purse. She wrote down a number, a name, an email address. "This is the contact of a project that helps migrant women in vulnerable situations. They're not from the government. They don't ask for papers. I don't promise they're going to get you out of here tomorrow, but they will listen to you. You need that, to be heard." Letitia took the paper as if it was something fragile. She looked at it without fully understanding. It had been so long since anyone had offered her something without asking for anything in return. "What if they don't believe me?" she asked with fear. "They will believe you. And if not, I will tell them what I saw, because there are still people who want to help." Maribel didn't stay much longer. She had to board her flight. But before leaving, she gave her a $20 bill. "Buy yourself something to eat, really. Don't say no," she insisted, seeing that Letitia hesitated. "Sometimes God arrives with the voice of an unknown woman." Letitia didn't know what to say. She just nodded. She watched her walk away among the crowd. For a moment, she thought it had all been a hallucination caused by fatigue, but the paper was still in her hand, with firm letters and a number written in blue ink. That night, with Maribel's bill, Letitia bought a hot meal at a store inside the airport. Rice, roasted chicken, sweet bread, and a bottle of water. She ate alone, but not with shame. That night she ate with something she hadn't felt in a long time: dignity. Hours later, she went to one of the bathrooms and used the Wi-Fi to send a message to the contact Maribel had given her. It was short, fearful. She just said her name, her situation, and that she had been at the Dallas airport for weeks. She didn't expect a response. But the next morning, when she reconnected, there was a new message. "Hello, Letitia. Thank you for writing. We are here to help you. Today we will come to see you." For the first time in a long time, Letitia felt something inside her loosen, as if a rope that she had been holding tight in her soul finally released. She didn't cry, not yet, but her eyes filled with a warm moisture, the kind that doesn't come from pain, but from hope. They arrived the next day, just as promised. Letitia recognized them immediately as soon as they crossed the main door of Terminal D. There were 2 women and a man, all with black jackets and backpacks over their shoulders. They moved with confidence, as if they knew the place well, as if they knew exactly what they were looking for. And they found it. "Letitia Duarte?" asked the younger woman, with a kind voice and Mexican accent. Letitia nodded, rising with difficulty from the floor where she was sitting. She was wearing the same clothes as in previous days. She adjusted her hood by instinct, as if she still wanted to hide. "We're from the Humanitarian Refuge Project," said the other woman, handing her a laminated identification hanging around her neck. "We received your message. We want to help you." Letitia didn't know what to say. For a second, she thought it was all a mistake, that perhaps they had come for someone else. But then the man spoke, with a warmth not easily found in strangers. "You're not alone, Letitia. We want to listen to you. We're not going to judge you." They sat in an empty cafeteria. The team bought her a hot coffee and a sweet bread. Letitia hadn't had breakfast. She accepted with shame, murmuring an almost inaudible "thank you." Then, with her hands surrounding the coffee cup, she began to speak. She told everything. She told about leaving El Salvador, her children's drawings, the promise made to her mother. She talked about Carla, the woman who abandoned her. She described the night sleeping on the icy floor of the airport, the dirty clothes, the bathrooms where she cleaned herself in secret. She talked about the food taken from the trash, the times she thought she was going to get sick, the anxiety attacks that made her tremble inside while appearing calm outside. But what most impacted the team weren't the material details. It was the level of contained pain in her voice, the way Letitia spoke without breaking, as if she no longer had tears to offer, as if she had learned to narrate her own tragedy with the naturalness of someone who no longer expects anything. "The worst wasn't the hunger or the cold," she said at one point. "The worst was lying to my mum. Each call was an act. I said I had work, a house, food, and in reality, I had nothing. Just this corner." She fell silent. The young woman from the team, visibly moved, approached and touched her hand. "You don't have to carry that alone," she said. "We're going to help you get out of here." They took some photos, with her permission. They registered her name, her story, her situation. They explained that they couldn't move her immediately, that there were processes, that the system was slow. But they promised they would do everything possible. That same afternoon, they would spread her case on social networks and that other organizations could collaborate. Letitia, incredulous, just nodded. Hours later, her story began to circulate. The official account of the project shared a publication with a discreet image, Letitia sitting with her head down, hugging her backpack. The text said, "This is Leticia, a Salvadoran mother who has been living for weeks at the Dallas airport. She arrived looking for a better life. She was abandoned, invisible to the system, but not to us. If you can help with food, clothing, or temporary accommodation, contact us." In less than 24 hours, the publication went viral among Latin communities across the country. Hundreds of comments appeared, offering help, asking how to collaborate. Some people sent money, others offered rooms, work, legal advice. Letitia didn't fully understand what was happening. One of the volunteers showed her the cell phone, the notifications, the messages of support. "Look, this lady from Houston wants to send you clothes. And this gentleman from Denver says he has contacts in a church that could help you with shelter." Letitia covered her face with her hands, overwhelmed. "I don't want handouts," she whispered. "I just want to work, to earn what I need. I didn't come here to beg." "And you're not doing that," the volunteer replied. "You're just asking for what you deserve, an opportunity." That night, for the first time, Letitia slept with a different feeling. Not in a bed yet, nor in a shelter. She was still in her corner with her blue blanket, her backpack, and her world reduced to the space between two columns. But something had changed. For the first time in weeks, she slept with the hope that someone would come back for her. And so it was. The next day, a group of volunteers from the project returned with a bag full of clean clothes, personal hygiene products, and something that Letitia hadn't had since she arrived: a charger for her cell phone. They were able to charge it, connect, respond to messages. She received a call from the same team. They wanted to organize an interview with a larger NGO, which helped regularize migrants without criminal records. It was a possibility, not a promise. But Letitia received it as if it were a ticket back to life. Before leaving, the young volunteer asked if she wanted to leave any message for those who had read about her and offered help. Letitia thought for a few seconds. Then she looked at the cell phone camera and, with her voice still weak, said, "Thank you for seeing me. I don't feel less for having lived through this. I feel alive, and as long as I'm alive, I'll fight to hug my children again." Only 2 days had passed since her story became public, but to Letitia, they seemed like weeks. In that brief span, something inside her had changed. Not physically, She was still sleeping in the same corner, on the hard floor of the airport, wrapped in the gifted blanket. But in the way she saw herself, she no longer walked with her head down. She was still cautious, invisible when necessary, but now her chest didn't shrink from shame. She had dared to tell her story, and the world's response wasn't rejection, it was humanity. The Humanitarian Refuge Project team accompanied her to her first face-to-face interview with a local NGO. It was a simple meeting in an improvised office in a Hispanic church on the outskirts of Dallas. Upon entering, Leticia felt out of place. The walls were decorated with religious phrases, the furniture smelled of old wood and coffee, and there was a board with names of other migrants written with a blue marker. "Don't be nervous," one of the volunteers told her while they waited. "They just want to hear you." Leticia nodded, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Not from fear, but from what that moment represented. Her only real chance to get out of that shadow life she had fallen into. If that door closed, where else could she go? The interviewer was a woman with a kind face, of Cuban origin, who spoke with a sweet and measured accent. She offered her water and listened without interrupting. She asked her basic things, her full name, her age, her country of origin, if she had a criminal record, if she had crossed alone, if she had been a victim of any type of violence. Leticia answered everything with sincerity. She didn't adorn her story. She didn't exaggerate anything. But there was a moment when she broke. "I haven't come here to ask for charity," she said, with a firm voice and a gaze full of tiredness. "I know how to work. I know how to clean, cook, take care of children, whatever they give me. All I want is to be able to do it without having to hide, without being seen as a problem. I'm not a threat. I'm a mother who just wants to be useful again." The interviewer wrote in silence, but her eyes moistened upon hearing those words. "Leticia, we're going to help you," she said at the end. "I can't promise that everything will be resolved quickly, but today we're starting the process so you can at least have a humanitarian permit, and we'll look for a support network so you have somewhere to stay in the meantime." Leticia didn't know how to react. The word permit sounded like a miracle to her. Support was something she no longer thought she deserved, but there it was. A door, among all those that had closed to her, was beginning to open. Upon leaving the interview, the team took her to eat. It was the first time since arriving in the United States that she sat in a restaurant. It was a simple place, a small Mexican eatery run by a couple from Michoacán. They served her rice, beans, hot tortillas, and a chicken soup. Leticia ate slowly, not out of shame, but because each bite tasted like something she had forgotten. Dignity. "Can you imagine everything you've been through?" one of the volunteers asked her as she dipped a tortilla in the broth. "No," Leticia replied, "and I don't want to forget it either." The conversation gave way to silence, that silence that only comes when one feels safe. That night, back at the airport, Leticia didn't sleep, not because she was afraid, but because she needed to think. Think about everything she had lived through, what she had lost, and the little she still retained, her strength, her story, her desire. She took out her notebook, that one where she had written thoughts, disguised lies of comfort, truths she couldn't tell her mother, and wrote something new. "I don't want to be remembered for sleeping on the floor or for eating leftovers. I want to be remembered for having remained standing when everything told me to give up." In the days that followed, more people approached her, some from the airport itself, employees, cleaning staff, store workers. They gave her words of encouragement, sometimes a fruit, sometimes a smile. A security man who until then had never spoken to her, discreetly left her a sandwich wrapped in a napkin one morning. "I left it over there," he told her without looking at her directly. "Don't forget it." Leticia smiled, grateful. She was no longer the invisible foreigner. She was still an outsider, yes, but now she had a name, she had a story, she had a voice. When she spoke to her mother again, for the first time she thought about telling her the truth, but not yet. It wasn't time yet. She only said, "Mom, things are getting better. Really, something good is coming." And for the first time, it wasn't a lie. The notification arrived one afternoon, while Letitia was sitting on the same bench as always, near the coffee machine. Her cell phone, now with battery thanks to the new charger, vibrated insistently. It was a message from the Humanitarian Refuge Project team. "Letitia, good news. The NGO has found you temporary accommodation. It's a small room, but it's clean, safe, and available from tomorrow. They will also help you with the paperwork for the humanitarian permit. We are with you." She read the message 3 times before reacting. Her hands were shaking. Not from fear, but because something inside her was finally moving. She stood up without saying anything, walked to one of the bathrooms, and locked herself in the cubicle at the far end. Only there, with no eyes to see her, did she let out a cry contained for weeks. They weren't tears of defeat. They were of relief, of having resisted, of knowing at last on the way to something different. That night she didn't sleep. She gathered her things calmly, although she didn't have much to pack. She folded her clothes carefully, stored the hygiene items in a small bag, and lastly, took out the photo of Dylan and Sophia. She looked at it for a long time. She spoke to them in a low voice, as if they could hear her. "Almost there, my loves. I'm almost there." She checked her suitcase, the same one she had left Chalatenango with weeks ago, the same one she had used as a pillow on so many cold nights. At the bottom, wrapped in a cloth bag, were still the 2 drawings her children had made for her before she left, one with her as a hero, the other with the 3 of them holding hands. They were wrinkled, but intact. Letitia took them out, smoothed them with the palm of her hand, and put them away again with more care than ever. The next morning, the team arrived punctually. Letitia got into the car without looking back. It wasn't that she forgot the airport. No one forgets their place of resistance, but she needed to see something else, feel another air, know that she could sleep under a roof without fear of being awakened by a guard or by the cold. The place they took her to was modest, a house converted into a shelter with shared rooms, clean bathrooms, and a common kitchen. Other migrant women lived there, each with her story on her back, some with children, others alone like her. They received her with tired but supportive looks. None asked too much. In that place, silence was another form of respect. That same week, Letitia began to attend legal counseling. She carried a folder with the documents the volunteers had prepared for her. Her name, the detailed history of what she had lived through, the abandonment, the lack of resources, her vulnerable status. It wasn't a guarantee of anything, but it was a beginning. A legal path, though slow, to stop hiding. She also began to collaborate in the shelter. She washed dishes, swept, helped take care of the other women's children while they went to job interviews. She felt useful. She felt that at last she could give something in return, and that gave her back her pride. One afternoon, while folding clothes in the community laundry, they lent her a phone to make a video call. She hesitated. She didn't know if she was ready for her mother to see her face after everything she had hidden. But upon seeing her image reflected on the screen, she realized something. Although she was still thin, with dark circles under her eyes and with the marks of tiredness on her face, she was no longer the same. There was something in her eyes, a spark. "Daughter!" exclaimed Doña Teresa on the other side, with a trembling voice and teary eyes. "Look at how you are! You're alive! Thank God!" Letitia couldn't speak at first. She just smiled. "I'm fine, Mom. Now I am. Really. I'm not alone anymore." She told part of the truth. Not everything, not yet, but enough for her mother to understand that things had been hard and had changed, that she had been cold, hungry, and afraid, but that she had also found good people. People who had extended a hand when she needed it most. After hanging up, Letitia went out to the patio of the shelter and sat under the sun. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The air didn't taste different, but it felt different. It was no longer that of a forgotten foreigner, but that of a woman who, despite everything, continued to build her place. That night, before sleeping, she opened her suitcase again. Not to take anything out, but to put something else in, a new sheet from the notebook where she wrote her thoughts. This time, it wasn't a dark confession, nor a merciful lie. It was a promise. My children will know that their mother didn't give up, that she resisted with hunger, with cold, with fear, but that she never let herself be defeated. I'm going to make this story worth it. Letitia turned off the light, settled on her clean mattress, and closed her eyes. She didn't know how long it would take to have a stable job, or when she would receive an immigration response. She didn't know if the legal process would be approved, or how much longer she would have to wait. But now, at last, she had something that kept her firm. A roof, a name, a story she no longer hid. And at the bottom of her suitcase, between wrinkled drawings and folded papers, there was still hope. And if you liked this story, you'll surely love the next one appearing on your screen. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, leave your like, and turn on notifications. Until next time.